begin our celebration, I want to talk to you for about half an hour, and I apologize for this because I am for the elimination of sermons on Sunday mornings, but I need to explain, both for you and for the radio audience, what we're going to do. It has been announced as an Aquarian Age religious service. I did not invent that title. It has nothing, so far as I know, to do with the Aquarian Age, if such a thing exists. And I don't like the word service. It's got all sorts of associations of sanctimoniousness. So I would rather call it a contemplative ritual. Period. Our purpose in doing this is to offer a suggestion to the churches, to the Christian, Jewish, and Islamic churches in particular. Because for a long, long time, the kind of religious celebration which they have conducted has been impossibly loquacious and didactic. Almost all our religious observances are nothing but talk. They tell God what to do as if he didn't know, and they tell the people what to do as if they were able to do it or even willing. And this throwing the book at people and telling them the word, I think we've had enough of it. Because the history of religion is almost equivalent to the history of the failure of preaching. Since preaching is a kind of moral violence which excites people's sense of guilt, and there is no more uncreative sense than that. You cannot love and feel guilty at the same time, any more than you can be afraid and angry at the same time. What seems to me to be lacking in our Western religious observances is some sort of social ritual or liturgy which gives an opportunity for spiritual experience. That is to say, for a transformation of the individual consciousness, so that in one way or another the individual is able to realize his oneness with the eternal energy behind this universe, which some people call God, and others prefer not to name or to conceive. The Western religions have, from an official standpoint, been somewhat suspicious and leery of mystical experience. Because in the founder of Christianity, mystical experience led to the claim that he was God incarnate, which was, to the Jews, a stumbling block, and to the Greeks, foolishness. Because if you believe that God is a monarch, a beneficent tyrant in charge of the universe, anyone else claiming to be God is obviously committing an act of subversion and would be suspected of introducing democracy into the kingdom of heaven, which is supposed to be a monarchy and not a republic. And I do not understand how we can be citizens of the United States, believing that a republic is the best form of government, but go on insisting that the universe is a monarchy. I feel rather that Jesus was a person who had this colossal mystical experience that we call cosmic consciousness, the experience that your real self is not that little superficial idea or image of yourself, which we call I, but the total energy of the world flowing through you and expressing itself in you, and that's the real you. And it was on that basis that he could say, I and the Father are one. What the Christians did was to stop the gospel cold by saying, all right, Jesus was God, but nobody else. And so, for lack of the spiritual experience of Jesus, nobody has been able to live the religion of Jesus. They have lived instead the religion about Jesus, which is a very different thing, because he's been put up on a pedestal and worshipped at a distance, and his example and life rendered ineffective, because you can't make the tail wag the dog or the cart pull the horse. You cannot expect love in action unless there is what the Christians call grace underlying it. And grace, so far as anybody knows, is a purely theoretical thing which you believe you've received, but there has never been any indication of it to speak of except in exceptional individual lives that occur rather occasionally. So what I'm proposing instead of the ordinary kind of religious service is, as I said, a contemplative ritual. And the idea is not to have everybody shaken up and whooping around like Indians on the warpath, but to bring about a state of profound peace. So therefore I should say something in a preliminary way about meditation, or contemplation, as I prefer to call it. Usually, when Western people hear that an Oriental practices meditation, he asks, "What do you meditate on?" And that question puzzles a Buddhist or a Hindu, because you don't meditate on anything any more than you breathe on anything. You breathe, and in the same way you meditate. The verb is in a way intransitive. Meditation is the act of allowing one's thoughts to cease. As Patanjali puts it in the beginning of the Yoga Sutra, yoga meaning the art of meditation, more strictly speaking, yoga means union. The union of the individual and the universe. He says, after saying now yoga is explained, he says, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga is stopping the agitation of thinking. Thinking is talking to yourself, or figuring to yourself. That's the way I use the word. Now, if I talk all the time, I don't hear what anyone else has to say. Consequently, if I talk to myself all the time, I don't have anything to think about except thoughts. There is no interval between thoughts during which I can come into touch with reality, that is to say, the world which thoughts represent, as words represent events, or as money represents wealth. And so if I'm never silent in my head, I'm living in a world of total abstraction, divorced from reality altogether. You may ask, what is reality? And people have various theories about what it is, but you must remember that they're all theories. Those who believe that reality is material are projecting upon the real world a philosophical theory about it. And those who say that it is mental or spiritual are doing likewise. Reality itself is neither mental nor spiritual, nor any concept that we can have of it. Reality is simply or anything else, non-verbal, and words are reality insofar as they are noises. But even that is saying too much. Now, therefore, to meditate, you might think that we attempt to suppress thought. We do not do that. Because you cannot meditate, let me put that in a more emphatic way. You cannot meditate. You, your ego image, can only chatter. Because when it stops, it isn't there. When you are not thinking, you have no ego, because your ego is a concept. the thinker behind the thoughts, the feeler behind the feelings. And the thinker behind the thoughts is only a thought, an idea of some reference point to which all our experiences happen. And that, of course, cuts us off from what we experience. It makes a great gap or gulf between the knower and the known. And that creates the spirit of alienation to the world from which we suffer. Conflict, hate, domineering spirit arise from that basic division. So when you come to an end of thought, and you don't know how to meditate, you don't know what to do with your mind, nobody can tell you, then thinking comes to an end naturally. And you just watch. You don't ask who watches, because that merely arises from the fact that in grammar every verb has to have a subject by rule. That is not a rule of nature, it is a rule of grammar. In nature there can be watching without a separate watcher, just as there can be flashing without something called lightning that does it. The lightning is, of course, the flashing. So when you realize that you've come to your wit's end, you can begin meditation. Or meditation happens, and that is, happening is the watching simply of what is. Of all the information to you conveyed by your exterior and interior senses, and of the thoughts that keep chattering on about it all. You don't try to stop those thoughts. You just let them run as if they were birds twittering outside. And they will eventually get tired of themselves and stop. But don't worry about whether they do or don't. Just simply watch whatever it is that you are feeling, thinking, experiencing, and that's it. Watch it. And don't go out of your way to put any names on it. That's really what meditation is. And you see, you're not expecting any result. You are in meditation in an eternal present. You're not doing it to improve yourself. You found you can't do that. Your ego can't possibly improve you because it's what's in need of improvement. Your ego can't let go of itself because it is a complex called clinging to oneself. That's what it is by definition. So it's just something that evaporates when it is understood that it is unable to achieve a transformation of consciousness, mystical experience, the vivid sense of union of individual and cosmos. So, one of the easiest ways to enter into the state of meditation is therefore listening to what is, using the sense of sound. Sound is, curiously enough, a sense that bores us less easily than sight. And when you listen to sound, you listen to it, just the random sounds, that are going on in the room, in the street, as if you were listening to music, without trying to identify its source, name it, or put any label on it at all. Just enjoy whatever sound may be going on, whether it's in this hall or whether it's in the area where you're listening to the radio. That's what we shall do at the proper part of the ritual. Just listen. Now we can go on from that listening to making sound ourselves and also listening to it. And instead of making sound, we learn the knack of letting it happen through us. Once a great choir master in England, Sir Walford Davies, was rehearsing a choir in the presence of the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was then William Temple, a great theologian. And this was a raw choir that didn't really know much about singing. And he gave them a hymn to sing that they knew very well. And to impress the Archbishop, they sang it with gusto, and it sounded forced and terrible. Then he had with him a professional choir, and he asked them to sing a little-known hymn and sing it several times until everybody got the hang of the tune. Now, he said, I want you to sing this tune, but there's one very important thing, and that is that you don't try to sing it. You mustn't try. You must think of the melody and let it sing itself. And they sang it very well. And he turned to the Archbishop and said, Your Grace, that's good theology, isn't it? And it obviously was, because William Temple told me the story. So then, we get to what is in India called the use of mantra. And that is the chant, words, sounds chanted, not for their meaning, but for their sound. And thus everything that will occur in the following celebration will not be in the English language. It is not intended to be understood in a discursive and intellectual sense. You are asked only to dig the sound. And I use the word dig advisedly because it means something a little more than appreciate. It means enter into, penetrate, get right to the bottom of. Because when you are listening to sound, and when you're letting sound hum through you, this is one of the most obvious manifestations of the energy of the universe. Shabda, as it's called in Sanskrit, is Brahman, commonly said. Sound is Brahman. Sound is God. That's the real meaning of in the beginning was the word. It doesn't mean in the beginning was the chatter. In the beginning was the commandment, the orders. It means the vibration, the word, in that sense. So we concentrate, therefore, purely on the sound, and you will find that although we have a chorus that has been made familiar with these mantras, some of them are so simple that you will all be able to join in with them. And please do so quite freely. It's a pity, you see, that the Roman Catholic Church, which used to have a mantric service, the Mass, is dropping it and putting the Mass into the vernacular. And not very good vernacular at that, so far as the English translation is concerned. So that it sounds, it's become terribly intellectual. And often there's somebody standing by the altar at a microphone to explain what's going on. And therefore, as Clare Booth Luce put it the other day, it is no longer possible to practice contemplative prayer at Mass, because you're being hammered at with information, with exhortation, with edification all the time. And the Catholic Church should realize that in giving up Latin, it has lost its magic. Religion is not supposed to be understood. Religion is that which is past understanding. Understanding may lead up to it as a pedagogue, but to express religion intellectually is using the intellect for something it can't do. It is comparable to taking up the automatic telephone and dialing WHATISGOD and expecting to get information as an answer. Although the telephone is very useful otherwise. You cannot find out the mystery of the universe through talk, only through awareness. And for that reason, we offer this as an example, and it's offered in this way. It is a ritual, and it has a certain order to it, but it's very easy to get together. It doesn't require an enormous amount of dramatic rehearsal. And it's something that any group can do anywhere on a do-it-yourself basis anytime. And I suggest that churches get rid of their pews, where everybody is herded in like cattle to look at the backs of each other's necks, and that they spread their floor with rugs and cushions, and that they have something in which people can approach an ineffable, that means beyond words, spiritual experience, and not be told and forced into a particular pattern of thinking, of mentation. So you see, for that reason, I have only given the slightest suggestion of how one uses these mantra or the silence for meditation. You all have your own way of doing things like that. Do it your own way. All this is a vehicle, a support for contemplation.
Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. Adinadana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. Hara Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. Utsavana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhiyami. Madatana Veramani Sikapadam Samadhyami. Sambhava Tathagata Om Mamuga Shidi Tathagata Shobhya Tathagata Pater noster, qui es in cieli, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitti debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostri, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo. Amen. Agios, agios, agios. Agios irma. Agios irma. Agios irquistela. Sancte, 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 Drina
and 3:03. Back in a second. Joe Frank is at 7 o'clock tonight, folks. Stay tuned.
Dr. Watts, you mentioned that the drug problems should be taken out of the hands of the police.
Yes.
And I agree that laws will only affect the behavior, not the attitude of a person. Whose hands do you think it should be put into?
The hands of physicians. It's a health problem. Just like if it would be tuberculosis or leprosy or what have you.
Do you feel that the drug problem in the United States is on such a larger scale that couldn't be handled the same way the British handled them?
Well, I think it could be handled that way.
Think it could?
Yes. I mean, it would mean a bigger organization of clinics. But I think that's the way to go about it. Now, part of the reason for there being a drug problem is a failure of religion. It used to be said, you know, what this country needs is a good 5-cent cigar. I would say what this country needs is a credible religion. Also, one that does something that none of the religions, or standard brand religions, are doing at the moment, you see. What they do is all talk. You go to a church service, and what happens? Spend a long time telling God what to do, as if you didn't know. And then a preacher gets up and tells you what to do. As if, you know, you could just do it like that. Be unselfish. Yeah. What? Why do you want to be unselfish? Obviously, because you want to have a better opinion of yourself, which is, of course, selfish. There's no way of making yourself unselfish on purpose. It's like saying, you must love me. So, all right. So I'm married for some time, and my wife says to me, oh, darling, do you really love me? Well, I say, I'm trying my best to do so. So there's no point in telling people what to do if they don't have the power to do it. And in order that they have the power to do it, you've got to change their state of consciousness. And what does that mean? It means overcoming the sense of alienation between the ego and the rest of the universe, so that you feel one with nature and with society, instead of cut off. Now, certainly psychedelic chemicals do exactly that. And of course, sometimes that is terrifying to people, because, say, under LSD, it's very easy indeed to get the impression that what you do and what happens to you are the same process. Very. Well, that can be scary. But when you suddenly find that there's just a happening going on, you say, who's in charge around here? So you may think also that you're God, that you're doing everything. But that's a terrible responsibility, to be God. There was a young man who turned himself into the Los Angeles police on a bad trip with a note which said, please help me, signed Jehovah. Or else you may think the opposite, that you're simply a puppet with no influence on anything. Well, these are two ways of looking at the same state of consciousness. And when this happens to a person who doesn't know anything about the psychology of religion, they are as scary as all get out. But when a person does have some comprehension, this is a surrogate mystical experience. It's like swimming with water wings, and which he finds enormously interesting. And so it is really, for religious reasons, fundamentally, that people take consciousness-changing drugs. Same goes for alcohol. Someone once remarked in England, on Sunday mornings, there's more Christianity in the pub than in the church. Human conviviality, let us say. So there are so many different angles to work on this, but the chaplains will never help in the problem so long as they're just moralizers. Our religion has to do something far more effective than moralizing. Now, come, what do you feel about this?
About the chaplain?
All right, about the chaplain. Are there any chaplains here?
One right here.
You are.
Right by your right side. So the country needs a credible religion. Is that possible?
I don't know why not. It wouldn't have to be organized necessarily, but the country is in fact trying to work one out.
Dr. Watts, doesn't the country have a credible religion?
No. I don't think so. I don't know what it would be. I mean, it has two kinds of spoiled Christianity. And Judaism, which for all practical purposes God is grandfather, and not to mention Mama, and I mean, I'm not talking about Hasidic mystics and fascinating people of that kind. That doesn't affect the country at large at all.
I guess what I'm saying is that what I would say is that sure, observably, in many respects, maybe we don't have a credible religion.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, there is a credible religion. It's there for anyone who wants to experience it and to live it.
What is it?
Christianity.
Yes, but you see, the difficulty is that that's your opinion. When you say that Christianity is the credible religion, in reality, even though most people don't know about it, well...
And likewise, it's your opinion that it isn't credible.
Oh, yes, of course it is. Because I think one of the first things that is required of a credible religion is that it come out frankly and say that all authority is your own, because you buy it. In other words, if you believe the Bible to be true and set it up as authority, well, you did it. That was your opinion. Or if, on the other hand, like Roman Catholics say, well, Protestants believe their own ideas about the Bible, but we interpret the Bible by the authority of the Church. Right? So it just puts the problem one step back. So you bought the authority of the Church. So long as you have an authoritarian system, you're always deceiving yourself.
If God is authoritarian, then we are deceiving ourselves.
Well, you see, if you believe that God is authoritarian in the sense of the monarch of the universe, I don't see how you can be a loyal citizen of the Republic of the United States and believe that the Republic is the best form of government.
Why is that?
Because if the universe is a monarchy, obviously monarchy is the best form of government. See, that's the root of social strife in the United States today.
Which I wouldn't really disagree with. It depends on who the monarch is.
Yes, of course it does. But we have a republic. That means democracy in the kingdom of heaven. And that would be considered subversion. Those who believe that the universe is a monarchy. See, this is the problem Jesus ran into. He had cosmic consciousness. He knew he was one with God. How on earth was he to say that in the context of Hebrew religion, which adopted its picture of God, which is incidentally idolatrous, from the pharaohs of Egypt and the Cyruses of Persia? The biblical God is a Near Eastern monarch of ancient days. King of Kings and Lord of Lords is the title of the Persian emperor. I am the Church of England. I happen to be an Anglican priest undercover. The preacher gets up and says, Almighty and everlasting God, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the only ruler of princes, who dost from thy throne behold all that dwellers upon earth. Most heartily we beseech thee with thy favour to behold our sovereign lady Elizabeth the Queen and all the royal family, etc., etc., etc. Well, now that's the language of court flattery. And I mean, although the President of the United States is fast becoming a sort of royal figure, we are supposed to have a republic. And the Constitution of the United States derives to a great extent from the thinking of Christian mystics from running from the 14th through the 17th centuries, including such groups as the Quakers, the Levelers, the Anabaptists, the Brothers of the Free Spirit, and George Fox's teaching of the inward light, God in us. And so if Jesus had lived in India and said, I and the Father are one, everybody would have said, of course. Congratulations, you found out. So, here's the problem, you see. Christianity made a mistake by claiming to be the only true religion, or at least the best religion, or top religion. And people claim this who've never studied the others at all. How can they possibly know? And it would be become a far more credible religion if it would admit to being a member of the Great Fraternity. And this is going to happen, because now we've got Hindu Catholic priests. And a very interesting group of people they are. But I think, you see, the point is that the real Christianity is not the religion about Jesus, but the religion of Jesus. And that the gospel is not a lot of talk about Jesus, but catching on to the experience of Jesus, his own inner consciousness. St. Paul puts it in this way: let this mind be in you, or let this state of consciousness be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought not identity with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself and made himself of no reputation, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient to death. See, so he's always trying to say, be in the same state of consciousness as Christ. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, but not I, But Christ lives in me. He becomes Alter Christus, another Christ. And that means an alteration in one's state of consciousness. So that you're no longer this miserable little ego, but an incarnation of God. Then they're really getting into religion.
Could you talk a little bit about your term of credible religion?
It has to be based on experience instead of on talk.
And you remarked a while ago that you felt there was a struggle going on to achieve this.
Yes, right.
Might achieve it, and I wish you'd talk a little bit about that.
Well, there are ever so many manifestations of it going in all sorts of directions, especially among young people. There's a tremendous awakening of interest in Oriental philosophy and religion, marked by the sale of books, which are a fairly accurate standard of what's going on, the proliferation of cults. After all, in San Francisco, we have the biggest Zen monastery in the world. That may seem odd. And all the yoga groups, there's yoga on television. There are courses at Harvard University, University of California on meditation.